Thank you, Sarah. We're continuing with the series Church on the Move, looking through the book of Acts. And this week, we're looking at good news for all. For all. Inclusivity. It's one of those words that's much talked about. It's become a buzzword. Inclusivity or exclusivity. Are you inclusive or exclusive? Is something included or excluded? Opposites, no middle ground at all. You're either in or you're out. I looked at some of our insurance policies and there's a whole list of exclusions. I think our home and contents policy runs to 23 pages and most of the exclusions are totally incomprehensible, and I defy anyone to read them all or understand them. I often receive exclusive offers from Marks and Spencer's or Tesco or any of the other companies we deal with. Exclusive, but to millions of customers. You hear of all-inclusive holidays, and quite often there are all sorts of exceptions which aren't quite included. It's a very topical issue. And although this morning's topic is inclusivity, good news for all, I want to start by saying that Jesus himself is exclusive. That famous verse in John 3 says, "For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son." There's only one Jesus. Jesus declared, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." Many of the songs we sing declare the uniqueness of Jesus. And Jesus preached no compromise. He paid no attention to the political correctness of the day. He didn't go along with the view that all roads lead to God. He said, "No one comes to the Father except through me." He had no tolerance of wrong. Where people were doing things which were wrong, he said so. There was no compromise with the culture of the day. And his teaching was actually offensive to many, especially the religious leaders of the day. They really didn't like what he was saying. And today, the teaching of Jesus, it still offends some people. And we need to be careful that we don't confuse inclusiveness with compromise. We can't compromise the message of Jesus to fit in with people's personal views or political correctness. Having said that Jesus was exclusive, his message was certainly not. His birth was in the lowliest of circumstances. It was announced to shepherds, considered to be the outcasts, people living out in the fields, but also to wise men, kings from the east, from the poorest people to the richest. His early years, he was a refugee in Egypt, had to flee for fear of being killed. His disciples were a whole range of people, from fishermen to a tax collector. He lived in a male-dominated society, yet he broke with that culture. He talked to women and welcomed them. You read the story of the woman at the well that would go to the well when no one else was there because she was an outcast. Yet Jesus went and talked to her. The woman who touched his coat in the crowd, where again she was ritually unclean in the eyes of the people, yet Jesus was there. He told the disciples off when they tried to discourage young children from approaching him. "Let little children come to me," was his view. He was not afraid of touching lepers, people that were unclean, people that had to ring a bell to warn people to keep away. Yet Jesus went and touched them. The disabled, the lame, the blind, the deaf, outcasts, people restricted to begging. There was no social welfare system to support them. Were all welcomed. No division. Tax collectors, hated by the Jews. Prostitutes, reviled by society. All these people Jesus touched. But he also engaged with the religious leaders. He taught in the synagogue. He wasn't limited to the poor and needy, nor to the rich and prosperous and the people that had standing in the community. Across the board, Jesus was involved. He broke down all the barriers and distinctions that were the accepted norm of the day. Racial, social, religious, all barriers broken down. His teaching, the parable of the Good Samaritan. Who is my neighbor? The Jews wouldn't have anything to do with the Samaritans. And yet here we have him teaching them that they were the neighbors. The parable of the great feast, inviting guests, rejecting the invitation. So what was the instruction? Go out into the roads around and just find people and bring them in. No one was outside of his love and care. So where does our reading today fit into this? Peter had spent 3 years walking with, learning from Jesus. He saw who Jesus mixed with. He saw many miracles. In fact, if you read the first part of chapter 9 of Acts, you'll find that Peter himself was being used to perform miracles. He listened to the teaching of Jesus. He listened to his parables. And yet, he still hadn't really got it. He still was firmly entrenched in his thinking. Jews don't associate with Gentiles. The message of Jesus is exclusively for us, not for others. And if you read the first part of chapter 10, you'll see that it took God speaking to Peter through a vision or dream to change his thinking. And even in that dream, it took 3 times before Peter got the message. The same image 3 times before it finally clicked. With all that Peter had seen and heard, how could he not realize that the good news was for everyone, regardless of who they are? But before we get too critical of Peter, however, we need to look at 1 or 2 other factors. Yesterday, we were reading the account in Matthew of the calling of the first disciples. And the instruction was, don't go into the house of a Gentile or a Samaritan. The message is for the lost sheep of Israel. In the early days, the disciples wouldn't have accepted any wider instruction. They knew the teaching of Moses, that God was the God of Israel. Paul's letters to the early churches continually were correcting them when their thinking was that all converts should accept Jewish traditions and rituals. It's not necessary, he said. It's not necessary. But it was a difficult concept for the Jews who had been waiting the arrival of the Messiah to accept that this Messiah, their Messiah, was actually the Messiah for the whole world, not just for them. So what can we learn from this? I'm not sure that Peter was being deliberately exclusive. It was almost being exclusive by default. And as a church, we can be exclusive, not because we're deliberately trying to exclude people, but just by accident, just because that's the way it happens. How easy would it be for people who don't fit the profile of our existing church to walk in? I mean, we would welcome them, wouldn't we? But how comfortable would they feel? How comfortable would we feel? Our life groups, by definition, one of the aims is to build close-knit relationships. How difficult does that make it for new people to come into a group and to be accepted? Churches tend to be self-perpetuating. They attract people like themselves. In some ways, that's natural. The people we interact with are generally people we like and get on with, people like us. Our group of friends tend to be people like us. Jesus was actively inclusive. He sought out those whose society rejected. Have you ever played hide and seek? It wouldn't be much of a game if the person doing the seeking just stood there and waited for all the people that were hidden to come out and reveal themselves. And sometimes church can feel a bit like that, can't it? That rather than seeking out those who are lost, we expect the lost to seek out us. The challenge to our church and to the church generally is to be actively inclusive, not to be passively inclusive. We'll welcome everyone who comes, but to actively look for those people and groups in our community that we currently do not reach, people that we really don't have much in common with. That's a difficult task, isn't it? But the challenge to us is to seek, not to wait for people to seek us. Big challenge. I want to leave you with the lyrics of a song from Stuart Townend. Sometimes when we sing songs, we can get caught up with the music and miss the words, but just want you to really listen to these words. Come, all you vagabonds, come, all you don't belongs, winners and losers, come people like me. Come, all you travellers tired from the journey, come wait a while, stay a while, welcomed you'll be. Come, all you questioners looking for answers and searching for reasons and sense in it all. Come, all you fallen, and come, all you broken, find strength for your body and food for your soul. Come, those who worry about houses and money, and all those who don't have a care in the world. From every station and orientation, the helpless, the hopeless, the young and the old. Come, all believers and dreamers and schemers, and come, all you restless just searching for home. Movers and shakers and givers and takers, the happy, the sad, and the lost and alone. Come, self-sufficient with wearied ambition, and come those who feel at the end of the road. Fiery debaters and religion haters, accusers, abusers, the hurt and ignored. Come to the feast. There is room at the table. Come, let us meet in this place with the King of all kindness who welcomes us in, with the wonder of love and the power of grace. The wonder of love and the power of grace. Let's be an all-inclusive church. Amen.